First disclaimer is I never got to finish watching the video. I just watched, as late as it is, I watched the Newzroom Africa interview of uDuduzane Zuma. They only uploaded it on YouTube last week, I think. I missed it when it came out. I don't remember when it came out, but I missed it when it came out. I know a lot of people were talking about it. A lot of people were cheering uDuduzane on for tearing those two journalists apart. And I'd like to think I'm a social commentator. I like analyzing the news. I like analyzing politics. I like analyzing leaders. I like analyzing the world and trying to make sense of human beings. I'm also a huge fan of psychology and how people's minds work. Making this video because I want to discuss the interview in summary, and I also want to talk about certain things or certain thoughts that came up in my mind while watching the interview. I'm a huge fan of Jacob Zuma Msholozi. Number one, as a human being, I'm quite fascinated by his leadership style. I'm fascinated by how he ran as a president. I have my own issues with him as a president, in the way he did certain things, in the way he addressed certain issues. I was one of the people that was demanding that he pay back the money for Inkandla, and I still stand on that. I believe a lot of the guys that were involved in the scandals in Inkandla have not been brought to book, but I'm a huge fan of Itima. He feels very relatable. He feels like a father, even to myself. The way he handled adversity and attacks, and the way he'd laugh things off and crack jokes, and his emotional intelligence and his way of navigating through tough terrain has been nothing short of brilliant. On top of that, the fact that he never had money, he never had money himself. The money was always around him, which I think is absolutely special for a person to do. So I've met Jacob Zuma. I met him back in 2010, I think. May have been 2010 when I was working for a mentor of mine. We hosted him and a couple of CEOs for dinner. I have met some of his kids, 2 or 3 of his children. A friend of mine took me along to one of his daughter's weddings, which was quite special for me, to be in that platform and in that space, you know. I've never met uDuduzane Zuma personally. He seems like a really charismatic, really cool gent. Very cool-headed, very level-headed. Thinks through and articulates himself extremely well. We cannot deny that. Dankie Queen Elizabeth for that English. Dankie William Shakespeare. You know, dankie Oxford and Webster dictionaries. The guy articulates himself very well. The interview was extremely frustrating because the journalist decided to focus on the Guptas and the Gupta allegations for almost an hour, which is very disappointing for a young man that already has proven to have so many fans in South Africa. A young man who's got a very colorful life himself outside of just his father. I mean, they could interview him about his father for an hour, you know, which would also be unfair. But they could interview him for an hour. What was your dad like growing up? Did your dad ever teach you how to think? What books did your dad recommend to you? Did your dad ever give you a hiding? Did he ever advise you on girls? Has your dad ever given you money? Has your dad helped you outside of any business dealings that are in the news? Has your dad ever helped you with business? You know, how do you feel about your mom? You know, what did you ever have a relationship with your mom? What's your relationship like with your sister, uDuduzane? What's your relationship like with your siblings? Would you ever feature as an extra on Uzalo? You know, his sister Ukuku is a producer, has a production house, and she's got may arguably be the most watched show on television, which is Uzalo on SABC1. Would you ever feature on Uzalo? You know, that would be something cool to watch. What's your relationship like with your siblings? Do you guys talk about politics? You know, how he thinks South Africa could be run better just as a gent. You know, that's just, I guess, with his father and his family. They could have asked him in that hour what married life is like. He's married to a beautiful colored lady, I think from Durban. What's married life like? Does your wife ever worry about you? Does she shout at you? What's your favorite meal that she cooks for you? Children, your friends. What's your relationship like with do you have friends? Do your friends ever visit you? Do you guys play sports? What sports do you like? Like cool stuff like that. I think so many people would like to know and like to get to know the guy. The guy, in almost like a Kanye West fashion, says he wants to run, I think, in 2024, whatever, which is pretty cute, but it's whatever. He's obviously an ANC loyalist. His father is as well, or has been for the longest time. But the interviewers decided to focus on number one, the Guptas, number two, the Gupta allegations, number three, the State Capture Commission. And what's worse is everything that they asked him, he's been asked before, whether in a court of law or by another journalist, or it's available on YouTube or on Google. And they went and they asked the exact same stuff that he's been asked so many times. And not only did they ask him the stuff that he's been asked so many times, they kept re-asking it in the same interview. They keep wanting to go back. So you say, yeah, but... And the guy, as frustrated as we knew he was, he kept a level head. And, I was reminded of why Donald Trump walks out of interviews. Like, besides the fact that Donald Trump hates CNN and other fake media and news outlets, to sit there as a leader and as an intelligent person who understands that there are intelligent people out there who watch and listen to you, and to be asked a barrage of ridiculous, retarded, dumb questions must be incredibly frustrating. And you don't have to have high emotional intelligence to cut an interview. You don't have to have low emotional intelligence to cut an interview and throw a fit and throw a tantrum. I hate your questions. I want to leave. You can have high emotional intelligence and be like, I can see the purpose of this interview and I'd like it to end and I want to be cut. I'm not appreciating it. I see that there's a bias. I see that there's an agenda. Because part of what he touched on was the fact that the State Capture Commission has been politicized. And he gave good reason, and the responses from these journalists were so pathetic. What Duduzane Zuma was trying to emphasize was, if the legal system's government wants to uncover corruption and bribery and proximity to those in power in this country, then they must open it up to everyone. There's an argument about how far back they should go. Back to 1994, back to apartheid, back to pre-apartheid. Like, how far do you go back to actually find out what corruption has been in this country? That's debatable. Then it's who is potentially corrupt. And the who, it has to start with the people that are making the most money off government in this country and even from the private sector. Who are the people, who are the companies, which are the companies that make the most amounts of money? Where is that money coming from? Who signs off on that money? If they are huge, and we saw this when the Guptas had a spotlight on them, so many things were uncovered in this country that people were not aware of. When the spotlight was shone on the Guptas, specifically at Eskom, we got to learn about Glencore. Well, I knew Glencore, but I guess the rest of the country didn't know how big of a company Glencore is and what extent of power they have as a commodities trading firm. And I think that they are a mining entity as well today. How big they are globally and what influence they have and what other scandals they've had globally. From Ivan Glossenberg to Mark Rich, all the way when it was Mark Rich and Company. For those of you who have an interest in looking up some of these things. How much guys like that, and even before Glencore, some of the other guys that have huge contracts, that have had contracts forever from apartheid days, and they have something called evergreen contracts, which means they don't expire. They don't expire. That's Eskom. Duduzane uncovered that I think 2% to 3% of all the supplies to SAA, which is a state-owned entity, only 2 or 3% are black suppliers, which clashes completely with the idea of black economic empowerment as chaired by the BE Commission that Cyril Ramaphosa chaired back then. The SABC uDuduzane trying to get more local music listened to support local industry, to be patriotic, to say, look, if we support local music, we will create local jobs instead of creating jobs overseas. it was exposed the extent, not the extent. We were shown a little piece of some of the people that are making money off government. If you look at some of the biggest construction projects, there was a scandal now with the M1 bridge collapsing. I think someone died when you go to Santon. I think it was done by Marian Roberts. There was scandals around collusion in the building of the stadiums for the 2010 World Cup. I have a lot of intel because I do the research on the economy of South Africa, all the money guys, not just Johan Rupert, not just Nicky Oppenheimer. When you go into your Eric Sampsons of the world with Max Steel, you've got South Africans living abroad like Vivian Immerman, you've got Dow Steyn, who now I think lives in England, even though he's got a home, Palazzo Steyn at Steyn City, and he's got a couple of homes in South Africa as well. To the Manel family that's linked to Patrice Motsepe, to the Harsoff family, which is also linked to Patrice, because they were part of the Anglo-Val mining group that gave Patrice a leg up. There's other families that have come to uncover, and look, there's black families as well, which are seen as success stories today. The Gnene brothers, obviously Richard Maponya. There's a whole lot of hidden guys, especially in Limpopo, that some people may not know. There's a long list of very wealthy people. And when you track wealthy people, you start uncovering a lot of deals that people aren't aware of. Deals locally, deals across the continent, deals across the globe. I mean, there's a Seacom deal of fiber that goes underwater, I think around Africa, which included, I think, Nedbank. It included Johan Rupert's companies. It included Shanduga. It included some companies overseas. And, there's the Grand Inga Dam project. I don't know if it's in Ghana or Ghana might be far. I'm not sure which country it's in, but there's these huge projects on the continent, even in the country, that some of us track, and you realize that there's so much money that's being made by certain people and no one ever asks questions of them. And when people wanted to know about Cyril Ramaphosa and his billion rand campaign and where the money came from, people wanted to know that, which is what uDuduzane was alluding to. Who are the people that have proximity to power? Nelson Mandela stayed at Steyn's home, which is now the boutique Saxon. It's a boutique hotel in Sandhurst. He stayed there when he was writing Long Walk to Freedom. There's a Nelson Mandela suite that people like Oprah and Will Smith have stayed in. I think one of his daughter's weddings was funded by the Oppenheimers, if I'm not mistaken. That's proximity to power. Thabo Mbeki has had a good relationship with Johan Rupert. Johan Rupert has spoken about it on platforms. You can find it on YouTube. I'm trying to think of other examples. There have been examples of people that are close to your ex-presidents, your Thabo Mbekis, your Nelson Mandelas. And I don't think these guys, for various reasons, like Jacob Zuma. Jacob Zuma's outlook on what he felt he wanted for South Africa and for South Africans was not the same. So when it was time for them to now come offer patronage and some kind of allegiance to Jacob Zuma, these guys seemed to pull back. They didn't want him to be in power, and Zuma had to find other business people to come close and fund him. The initial people that were close to him, who have been close to him for a big chunk of his political life, were the Indians, the Reddy family, Vivian Reddy in Durban. You've got the Sheikh family, for example. And then obviously what became popularly known, the Gupta family as well. There's a lot of other Indian families. Then there's Afrikaans families that people don't know about. I think the more popular one is Charles Senegal, who does sugar and other farming in KZN, I think ePongola and places like that, or Pongolo. There's a lot of other Afrikaans people that love Zuma. I remember when I met the Nando's founders, the one guy said he's flown with Jacob Zuma before, and he said that the man's humility is absolutely disarming. Zuma's ability to connect with people on a very human level is something that I also experienced in 2010 when I met him, because he wanted to know my clan names and know where I was from, etc. Those are the reasons why obviously people like him. But people get close to those in power because they are business people and they want access to government contracts because that's how you work. It's arguably the reason why Brian Joffe gave Cyril Ramaphosa chairmanship at Bidvest, so that Cyril could unlock opportunities in government It's the reason why he still got so many directorships. I think at some point at 18. And he ended up taking those shares and building Shanduga. Tokyo Sehwale built him Vela Panda as well through something like that. At some point that he was the BE face for ABSA. He was one of the guys with Trevor Manuel and his wife Maria Ramos who brought in Barclays to come in and buy a stake in ABSA at that time. So those are some of the deals. Recently on Twitter, Tito Mboweni, our finance minister, was having lunch with the Fansale family. The Fansale family owns a company called ZZ2. They are one of the largest tomato producers in the world, private tomato producers in the world. But they also are quite big in other produce and livestock as well. Having lunch, no one asks questions. A lot of these guys have meals in Stellenbosch. A lot of these guys fly with some of these guys. No one asks questions. It just so happens that when Jacob Zuma was linked to this family who were coming to disrupt the incumbents who had been eating at a lot of these state-owned enterprises, your Bidvests, your Glencores, your other companies. There's a lot of companies. I mean, we saw now with COVID and PPE, all these companies, including some Maponya family company, that were supplying PPE. But if you could publish a book of all the biggest tenders in this country, construction, infrastructure, security, cleaning, supply of whatever, and actually see where most of the money is going to. And again, now and then moving backwards, and then zoom in and figure out the owners of these companies, what relationships do they have with presidents and members of parliament and other heavy politicians. You will be extremely shocked. You will be extremely shocked. And it's one of the reasons why all parliamentarians don't want. It's been raised, I think, twice, where people wanted to know who funds these people. We want to know who funds their campaigns, including the EFF. We had Adriano Mazzotti now, who was linked to the EFF, for example, and who's also been linked to Nkosazana Dlamini Zuma. But a lot of people want to understand this dynamic. When you are in power, and if you ever watch American series, a lot of the American series that have political content, you see the funders of campaigns and how much people that want to be senators or presidents, how much they have to woo and charm all these guys to fund them, and how they have to make sure that once they've been funded, they either keep certain policies in place or they change them to suit their funders. Every funder has an agenda, and they want whoever they fund, if they win, to take care of that agenda. And when you're talking state capture, you're talking that. You're talking, who did Nelson Mandela, who did Thabo Mbeki, who did Jacob Zuma, who does Cyril Ramaphosa, who do they serve? Whose interests do they think of? Because it's easy to serve the poor masses. The poor masses need an RDP, which they get. They need free schooling, which they get. At the schools, the kids get fed, which happens. There's free clinics, which are available with free medication. We have obviously basic infrastructure like the roads to transport the trucks to keep our economy going, to transport workers so that they can go to work and keep the economy going. There's other infrastructural projects like hospitals and bridges, maybe government buildings, etc., etc. All these things happen. And the people in power take care of the poor. But what about the rich? What are they doing for the rich? From tax perspective, from giving work to, from ensuring that there's red tape that stays in place so that there's no competitors. I once read this and I've struggled to find it since. British American Tobacco, which was bought, it used to come from Rembrandt, which was Johann Rupert's father's company. They ended up becoming BAT, British American Tobacco. At some point had in place the only right to import tobacco from Zimbabwe, of which Zimbabwe, I don't know about now, but it used to be the largest tobacco producer on the continent, on the African continent. And they were the only company with a license to import tobacco from Zimbabwe, which means anyone else who wanted to import tobacco, any small little cigarette, same way Anton Rupert built his cigarette business in his garage, any little black kid that wants to build a cigarette thing in his garage can't do that. Which is again also why we get these things called illegal cigarettes. Illegal cigarettes just means that they're not paying, it's almost a 50% tax to SARS. And it means it's not going through the channels. And those channels are what's called red tape. When you look at the mining charter, which again, the Zuma administration tried to transform, There's a very low requirement for BEE and for black owners in the mining space. And they failed the same way they failed at the SABC, the same way they failed at SAA, the same way they failed at ESCOM. And when Duduzane speaks about the politicizing of the State Capture Commission, he's talking about focusing purely on Jacob Zuma and the Guptas, and that's it. And not looking at anyone else that is benefiting. How are they benefiting? How much money do they make? Who are they friends with? Do their kids go to the same school? Are there any linked business interests with them or their children or their spouses or anyone else? It's absolutely shocking. And the journalists given an opportunity to maybe ask Duduzane about these things are not listening. All they want to focus on is the Guptas and your allegations and it's very tiring and it's very sad and it saddened me. And we have to remember that that journalists are captured by their salaries. And their salaries are paid by whoever owns the media company. And whoever owns the media company is whoever is rich. And we found out before that companies like ENCA are indirectly owned by Remgro, which is a Rupert company. And then you start tracking back. I mean, there were issues with ANN7 and the New Age being funded by the Guptas. They were coming with an alternative voice because, as I said, Jacob Zuma needed rich people to come and fund him, which he didn't have because the incumbent wealthy white people didn't like him. So it's very tricky, this thing, when you understand politics and you understand how these things work. And it's sad when a young celebrity like uDuduzane Zuma that like a lot of girls like and a lot of maybe young men want to emulate, you've got him on a platform and you have an opportunity to ask him so many other questions and you don't. You've got an opportunity to get to know the guy and to build some type of relationship with him, even as a journalist, so that one day, if he ever has power or an opportunity for you, he considers you and he doesn't think this guy's just a clown that can spend a whole hour asking retarded, repeat questions from the past without getting to know anything else. uDuduzane is the type of guy, because he seems like a defensive, he answers defensively. He doesn't offense. He doesn't, what's the right word? He doesn't offer. He doesn't propose new information. He answers whatever you ask. That's why even when they were asking, would you not like to cross-question some of these people that have made allegations about you? I was like, they wanted to ask about me. I answered, I'm done. I don't have time for petty squabbles. I don't have time to be chasing after other people and painting them in a bad light. I've got shit to do. You know, so you want to ask him stuff that he can answer. You want to ask him like, how do you feel about non-racialism? Like, what do you think about having lots of kids? What do you think about polygamy? You know, what do you think about family dynamics? What do you think about globalization? Do you think we should open the borders? Do you think Julius Malema would be a great president for the country? How do you think about the state of celebrities, of globalization? What do you think of Asia? Do you think the Asians will eventually take over Africa? What's your stance? Are you doing business in Asia? Should black kids be moving to Asia to set up businesses there? Should we be looking to colonize neo-colonialism? Should we be looking to colonize Europe by building African businesses there so that we can try and get back some of the wealth that they took from us by setting up legit businesses there and maybe even setting up charity organizations so that Europeans donate to African initiatives? Ask him questions like that and get to know the guy, and don't waste an hour with the same old shit. And sadly, obviously, like I said, a lot of people were excited by Duduzane's responses. He exposed the two journalists for being pap, which is fine. We didn't hear a lot from him, sadly. And we missed out on an hour-long opportunity to actually learn so much about him, about his dad, about his mom, about his sister, about his other half-siblings, about his family, and about some of the other businesses that he's done in this country before the Guptas. The jobs that they created, the opportunities that are out there, the red tape that is out there for the next black child that doesn't have a father who's a president, that doesn't have friends who are wealthy people from Eastern Asia, from Western Asia, sorry. Like, I was quite disappointed. But anyways, I just wanted to say this because I had a lot of thoughts about the interview as I was watching it, and I wanted to share my thoughts with you. Hope this adds value to your life as well, and I'm always happy to engage about anything in the world. Paying you all the black pen. Cheers.